Okay, good afternoon, everybody, or good morning for some. So welcome to the Master Data Marathon 2.0. My name is Dan Barton, and today I'm going to be talking to you about how to approach your ERP data governance strategy. What I'm going to talk about today is a strategy that's fit for purpose, give you some insights on techniques and methodologies. We'll look at some of these cloud enablers, but the important bit really is ensuring that you get some return on your investment when it comes to data processing, data quality and data governance. So we'll touch on all this stuff quite quickly. What we'll run through then, I'll introduce myself and the company, and then we'll talk about different approaches to data strategy. I think it's quite an important topic. And then we'll focus on one that I've used, and I'll explain a little bit of background on why we use this methodology, and share with you some of the results, touch on some of the cloud enablers as well, and some takeaways as well. And I'll be happy to answer some questions, hopefully. So just very quickly about me before I talk about Bluestonex. So my background is predominantly ERP. I've been a business analyst, an ERP manager. So I've not only worked in consulting for companies like Deloitte, and obviously I'm co-founder of Bluestonex and have been for the last 8 years. But prior to that, I was an end user for many years, involved in ERP projects, namely SAP being the main ERP. So I worked as an end user, became a kind of super user, power user, and then actually moved into information technology at that point, where I managed a team of ERP business analysts, from configuration to programmers. So that's kind of where I got my my scars. Yeah, so I've kind of been on both sides of the fence. In terms of the company, Bluestonex, really, the X in Bluestonex is about innovation and user experience. So we typically look for gaps in ERP software. We focus on SAP, but what we're going to talk about today is a little bit more generic, or a little bit more holistic than just SAP technology. What's probably different about us and some of the methodologies I'm going to talk about is we use design and human-centered design in a lot of what we do. So it's not your typical waterfall type project management or methodologies that we use. It's a kind of hybrid. And we actually employ designers because we think the whole user experience, human-centered design aspect is quite important in some of these things. It's probably a little bit of a foreign territory, but yeah, that's how we do it. It seems to work well. And where I'm delivering this presentation today, we're actually part of a network which is customer innovation spaces. So yeah, we've converted a church into a customer innovation center. So that's where we do a lot of our innovation around data governance, data quality. Some of the customers, so we have quite a wide spectrum of industry, but also size of customers. We've got some fairly big global customers with multiple ERP systems, right down to quite small to medium enterprises with you know, your traditional one ERP system. So just to talk about data and data problems then. So, and I'm going to talk quite a lot about ERP. I think the whole topic of data lakes and these types of discussions, they kind of get lost, but where we focus is around ERP, really as being that main system of record, or one version of truth. And even today, even in the businesses that we work with, we see, even with a lot of tool sets out there, we still see a lot of manual ways of working. Yeah, lots of duplication of effort, practically zero workflow governance. Yeah, very much kind of email and Excel based. It's quite staggering, really, when you know all the technology is kind of out there, and yet people still adopt these ways of working, and it's very much a kind of unstructured process as well. A lot of companies that we see and who we talk to today as well, they're very much reliant on key individuals, of which all these things, time and resource, and more often than not, pretty poor data quality and poor data processing quality as well. So just to talk a little bit about data strategy, this is probably familiar with a lot of people when we talk about typical data management frameworks. And this is an interesting concept, actually, because a lot of businesses will do the whole identification of data domains and running reports and all this type of, and this what you're seeing, I'm not going to read it word for word, it's quite typical on here. And we'll come back to how we use a similar framework, but it's kind of, it's swapped around slightly, and I'll explain why, but I won't talk through this slide word for word. But what we often see is people will run various reports to try and find out the state of play, and more often than not, what drives it is probably either a new ERP implementation or an upgrade. Certainly in the SAP world, people are moving from a version of SAP called ERP ECC, Enterprise Central Component, and they're moving on to S/4HANA, which is Intelligent Enterprise. So all these kind of buzzwords that SAP practitioners will know and love. But typically, we see a lot of reports, a lot of data cleansing before people migrate. They also have to do things in the SAP world around converting customer and vendor records into a different kind of data domain called business partner. And then once they've done that move, typically they'll then start being more concerned or more focused on their governance, And this is the key bit that I want to talk through around the business as usual governance strategy. You can talk about cloud and technology and all that type of stuff, but basically this slide says this is the typical approach to people to get to an intelligent enterprise. So if you look at the top strand here, so this is what people follow today. So they will spend a lot of time profiling data and understanding data, and then they will spend an even more bunch of time reviewing and cleansing that data before they actually start managing the data from a process point of view, a business as usual point of view. And this is the key. This is the key part for me. And this is how we approach it slightly differently. So this top line is how people do it. They profile data, they run reports, they'll start reviewing and cleansing data, and then they'll actually start managing data. And then obviously associating data or maybe integrating data with other systems downstream, upstream, and eventually what they've done in the review stage, they might start archiving. We do it differently, and I'll explain why. The first thing that we try and do in terms of methodology, we want to try and understand what that business as usual process is. So whatever the data domain, so whether it's products, customer, vendor, GL account, whatever that data domain is, understand that process and map that process and manage that process. Because by doing this, you'll start to understand it. And by understanding it, you'll be able to review it and you'll be able to cleanse it. So by doing the process first and establishing that data process first, it actually gets you to the end goal a lot quicker. Because what we find when people start profiling data and running data reports, what will happen is they'll spend weeks, months profiling and analyzing data and then cleansing data. And by the time that they've got to the end of that, the rules might have changed, the policies might have changed, the actual data fields might have changed. So by having a business as usual process and governance process around data processing, you're actually establishing your rules and you're understanding it a lot earlier in the life cycle of data. So it might sound obvious, but everybody starts running reports on data. Let's have a look at our data. Well, actually start implementing a best-in-class data process. Start with your data process and start putting in your rules early, because by having your rules, you can then understand what's going on with your data, and then you can use your rules to actually clean up your legacy. So it's a different way of looking at it, a different mindset. Seems obvious, not many people do it like this. Okay, so this is kind of what we're saying. There's two distinct tracks almost that can be run in parallel. You can have one which is governing your data, which is what I'm talking about. This is where we start, okay? And by governing that data and using all this nice technology around, you know, maybe workflow, business rules, policies that you want to adopt to your data, and we'll talk about technology, but I want to focus on the process. So we're talking about adopting this new way of working. And by doing that, you can then sort your legacy data out. And this is the quickest, most effective way to get that intelligent enterprise. Okay, so bit of an odd concept, but it works. And the reason why we kind of did it like that is a couple of key points here. So again, sounds obvious, but this is based on customer feedback. Okay, so speed. Yeah, speed to deploy some of these tools, okay, and some of these processes, coupled with almost like an agile architecture, yeah, allowing really smooth and quick integration. Those are the key bits that give you your best ROI, providing you adopt that strategy of focusing on your business as usual processes. So I'm not talking about data stewards or data managers. I'm talking about people requesting data. Yeah. So what they do today, they request data maybe on an Excel spreadsheet, and it will go into an email chain, and you know it might get manually keyed into the various ERP systems. Look at that process and start with the process first. Establish the rules. And then once you have that process, yeah, it's a case of you might already have a data solution, a data technology that's going to help you with that process. But this is very much as Bluestonex, this is how we approach it, because we know that we have the software solutions to kind of help the customer deploy quick and integrate quick. But it's very much, as I keep saying, it will come down to that approach around data processing and data governance. As I said, again, if you adopt that approach, yeah, so we're talking about process rather than kind of real technical data domains. If you start with that process, you can adopt methodologies such as this. So we have software solutions. I'm not really going to talk and sell kind of what we do. There's more about the methodology really and why it works. But having this hybrid agile methodology, okay, so in our case, workshops. Workshops shouldn't be, when it comes to data, shouldn't be technical things. So they should be talking about process. Who's involved in the process? Who's involved in the workflow? What, you know, is there any kind of conditional workflow required? Examples being, I have a process, but when a payment term has been requested for a particular vendor, we really need to get another approval step from, let's say, head of finance. So workshops should be focusing on the process. Who's involved in the process? Yeah. So the project preparation from a Bluestonex approach point of view, yes, we can deploy software incredibly quickly, but in parallel, you need to, this helps with buy-in as well, but these discovery workshops, the discovery workshops should really start looking at processes and business rules. Yeah. Who's involved in the process? Yeah. It doesn't have to go into incredibly finite detail of you know, technical rules. It should be more about process. Who needs to see what when? Who needs to approve what when? Yeah. Now, when we run our workshops with businesses and our customers, it's meant to be iterative. So you capture that workshops, and the solution that you're going to deploy, it should be agile enough where it can be changed incredibly quickly and then played back into that workshop and say, this is your process. Does this look like your process now? You know, this is the workflow that's being driven by the solution. Does it work? And it's very much iterative. Yeah. Some people call it design thinking. We like to kind of call it agile hybrid, because when we're talking about data and we're talking about ERP things and ERP projects and systems, typically you have to go through various systems, you have to go through various change control. So to say it's agile would be lying a little bit, but it's meant to be incredibly quick. Yeah, and it's meant to be iterative, and it's meant to be playing it back to the key stakeholders involved. Yeah, so this actually works, believe it or not, with data projects, it works. So we've brought that agile methodology or design thinking, again, focusing on that human-centered design. So this is about people as much as it is with data. Yeah, it's really, really important. So this is how we do it. Seems to work. As I said, your processes during that workshop, I'm sure everybody's familiar with this, you know, level 0 process, level 1, and so on and so forth. A lot of people start right in the detail, really in the detail of what field needs to be where and what rules do I need. Start off with a process. What does it look like? Who requests it? Is it a human? Is it a system? Especially when we talk about ERP, because we've got lots of integration layers. We might have a product lifecycle system. We might have a manufacturing execution system. We might have to create our data in our ERP and then send it elsewhere to a CRM system or a financial reporting system. Yeah, but what does that process look like? Create requests. Creating what? Creating new data, change data, extend to data. Yeah, and then what happens then? Once you've created it, where does that form? Where does that information go? So it's all about process. And these process in our world, they can be different things. They can be system driven, they can be human driven, they can be built on rules and policies. And again, typically, best practice, as you're gathering and enriching data, certainly in the ERP world, you want approvals. Yeah, those approvals might be conditional, or they might just live with a data owner. And then finally, at the end of your process, you want to be updating things. Yeah, you want your data to be in line, and you want it real time. So this is all about process. It's not so much about the technical stuff. Here's a typical example here, right? So vendor processes. It is amazing how many ERP consumers today have a offline vendor process. And what I mean by that is people want to onboard a vendor, so they'll send them a spreadsheet and say, hey, fill this in. It'll come back from the vendor, maybe incorrectly. It will come into a team of people that will probably key it in incorrectly. But the point is, you need to look at your, not so much your as is, but your to be. Yeah, during this process, when we talk about process and process governance, you should aim for blue sky. Why not? Yeah, so this is a typical level 1, what we would call it. So from that level 0, we want to bring it down to level 1. Yeah, so in this instance here, you know, workshop would drive some of this stuff. You might have a buyer within the organization that creates a request for something like a new vendor. Okay, and you want to get, and this is where cloud technology comes in. This is where you want to get the vendor interacting with your data set. Yeah, now that makes some people nervous, but believe me, in terms of streamlining process and process governance, this is the right thing to do. Instead of this manual workflow, email, offline thing, use technology that's out there today. So whether it was a portal, web technology, you can start consuming and integrating that. We use solutions and have built solutions for processes just like this. So I've got a buyer requesting something. I interact with a vendor. Vendor will put in data. I'll validate that data that they're keying in real time. I might use some APIs. Yeah, again, using cloud technology. Let's use some APIs to validate banking, address, postcode data. You name it, it can be done. Okay, and it can be done quickly. There's no need to spend months, years building these processes. They should be agile, they should be quick. Point being, establish your process around the to be. Yeah, if you've got your as is and it's perfect and it's efficient, brilliant. But in our experience, that's not the case. Okay, so this is really important. So if you do that, because I'm conscious of time here, but if you do that, lots of benefits. Okay, it sounds obvious, but there are real tangible benefits. I will send some links out to websites on where you can start achieving some of these things, but yeah, they should be obvious to you guys, right? Removal of forms, efficiency savings, reduction of keying in. This is quite an interesting one, actually. In our experience, everybody wants lots of business rules, yeah? Lots of business rules. Now that's great if you know them, but a lot of the time it takes time to establish what your business rules are. And what I mean by business rules are kind of the key metrics that you want being applied to your data to govern your data. Typically, we see around between 30 and 40% of business rules populating data on day one. Yeah, your end goal is to try and get as much data populated via rules. But again, don't boil the ocean with this sort of stuff, okay? So just quickly onto some of the data software that's out there. Again, I think I've talked about APIs and things like that. We could talk through machine learning and stuff, but for what I'm talking about, data processing, again, there's a ton of workflow solutions out there. But the important thing are things like APIs and validation checks and business rules. Okay, so there's a bunch of stuff on cloud. We do a kind of hybrid of cloud and on-premise solutions, but these I'll let you guys read through it. And in terms of the architecture, this is quite important. So when you deploy something, certainly around ERP, you want to deploy fairly quickly. And our approach, again, because it's kind of semi-agile. So what we might do in the SAP world now, we typically deploy our data solution to the on-prem system, okay? And that's what we would call the core. But then we will augment that core with cloud microservices, because microservices incredibly quick to spin up, incredibly powerful without having to kind of do all this decoupling in your core ERP. So this is an example of, like, as I was talking, business partner or vendor onboarding. We would deploy a solution to the core ERP, and then we will augment it with a portal in the cloud that does all this capturing of information from the vendor, enrichment via APIs, and so on and so forth. So this is a typical architecture that we would see. So the key learnings, folks, so as I said, hopefully I get this message across, but concentrate on the process. Yeah, don't try not to get into the technical data domains straight away. That will come, but first of all, get your buy-in from your stakeholders, concentrate on your process. It will establish your ROIs. Education. Okay, a lot of the time, hopefully for none of you guys out there, but data is a kind of turn off for a lot of people. Yeah, so yeah, education is key, I think. Starting small, yeah. This is quite a difficult one to get through, but when you work with quite flexible solutions that are going to introduce governance around your data and your data processing, it's important that you don't boil the ocean. So I gave you that metric before around business rules. Everybody just tries to populate business rules from one day, from day one, yeah, and that's not the way. Try and establish your critical business rules, and then you can grow it over time. It doesn't have to be all done, all singing, all dancing day one. Get your process in place with your critical rules, and then you build on top. Quick deployment, obvious for me to say, because I know that we've got the solutions there to help customers, but look at solutions that are quick to deploy, yeah, with minimal infrastructure and minimal decoupling of what you've already got in your landscape. Again, skill set's quite important. You need a mixture, believe it or not, with data, from technical to very much process skills as well. Yeah, so your business analyst type stuff. And whatever solution that you're going to invest with, in my opinion, you need to try and keep your core as stable, and then you augment via the cloud. So again, I won't go through all these things, but look at these microservices. They're effective in terms of cost, but they're incredibly effective when it comes to agility and the pace at which you can move. Yeah, and then lastly, obviously cost. From my experience, people have to, typically with MDM and MDG solutions and data governance, you have to come up with a business case. But what I see a lot is people come up with the business case and they get it signed off. Very rarely do they track that business case throughout the life cycle. And very rarely do they go back and say, do you know what? How did we do against that business case? So as surprising as it is, that's what they see. So I'm just calling out the key takeaways. Okay, we'll take some questions now, folks. Hopefully that was insightful. So I'm going to stop sharing now and over to you for questions. Thank you.